The first time Ethan Caldwell saw Julian Harper, his world tilted. It was a crisp autumn evening in New York City, and Ethan, a 35-year-old tech mogul who'd built a fortune from nothing, stood in a crowded Chelsea gallery, champagne flute in hand, feeling untethered. Then Julian, 32, with his disheveled blonde curls and a smile that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, walked in, and Ethan forgot how to breathe. Julian wasn't like the polished elites Ethan usually met. He was a freelance photographer, all raw energy and unfiltered charm, with a laugh that echoed through the room. That night, as they talked about art, dreams, and the chaos of the city, Ethan felt something he hadn't in years: alive. By the time Julian scribbled his number on a napkin and pressed it into Ethan's hand, Ethan was already falling. Their romance unfolded like a fever dream. Julian's tiny Brooklyn apartment became Ethan's sanctuary, a place where he could shed the weight of his million-dollar empire and just be. Julian would tease him about his tailored suits, calling him Mr. Millionaire, while Ethan marveled at how Julian could make a $10 diner meal feel like a 5-star experience. They danced in dive bars, kissed under the Brooklyn Bridge, and spent late nights planning a future that felt infinite. Ethan, who'd always guarded his heart, let Julian in completely. But love, like code, can hide bugs beneath its surface. 6 months into their whirlwind, Ethan noticed cracks. Julian's stories about his photography gigs grew vague. He'd disappear for days, claiming creative retreats, only to return with excuses and that same disarming smile. Ethan ignored the red flags until the night he found a bank statement in Julian's bag. It showed a transfer of $200,000 from Ethan's personal account, one he'd never authorized. His heart sank. The man he loved had been siphoning money, bit by bit, using Ethan's trust like a skeleton key. When confronted, Julian didn't deny it. "I needed it, Ethan," he said, eyes wide with something that looked like regret but felt like a performance. "I was going to pay you back." Ethan's world shattered. He kicked Julian out, changed his locks, and swore never to let anyone that close again. For months, Ethan rebuilt his walls. He threw himself into his company, a tech startup that revolutionized data encryption, and buried his pain in board meetings and late-night coding sessions. Friends urged him to date again, but the betrayal lingered like a bruise. Julian had vanished, leaving no trace except the hole in Ethan's heart and his bank account. A year later, a letter arrived. No return address, just Julian's familiar scrawl. "I'm sorry," it began. "I'm not the man you thought I was, but I need to see you. Meet me at our bench in Prospect Park. Please." Ethan's first instinct was to burn it, but something, curiosity, longing, or maybe just weakness, made him go. The park was quiet, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. Julian sat on their bench, thinner, his curls tamed, his eyes carrying a weight Ethan didn't recognize. "I didn't just take your money," Julian said, voice low. "I took your trust, and I've hated myself every day since." He slid a folder across the bench. Inside was a cashier's check for $200,000 and a list of wire transfers showing every cent repaid. "I sold everything," Julian said. "My camera, my gear, my dreams. I wanted to make it right." Ethan stared at the check, his throat tight. He wanted to hate Julian, to walk away and let the past stay buried. But Julian's eyes held a truth Ethan couldn't ignore. "Why now?" Ethan asked. Julian hesitated, then pulled up his sleeve, revealing a hospital wristband. "I'm sick, Ethan. I don't have long. I needed you to know I'm not a monster." The words hit like a punch. Ethan's anger warred with something softer, something he thought he'd killed off. He didn't know what to say, so he just sat there, the check trembling in his hands, as the man he'd once loved bared his soul. Ethan's mind reeled as he sat beside Julian on the park bench. The hospital wristband gleamed under the fading light, a stark reminder of Julian's confession. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. What was wrong? How long had Julian known? But the weight of the moment pinned his words in his throat. Julian broke the silence. "It's leukemia," he said, his voice steady but fragile, like glass about to crack. "Diagnosed 4 months ago. I've been fighting it, but it's winning." He looked at Ethan, his brown eyes searching for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or just understanding. "I didn't come back to hurt you again. I just needed to make things right before." Ethan's fingers tightened around the check. He wanted to believe Julian, but trust was a currency he'd spent too freely before. "You think this fixes it?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. "You stole from me, Julian. You broke me." Julian flinched but didn't look away. "I know. I was drowning in debt, medical bills from my mom's cancer, loans I couldn't pay. I saw you, this man who had everything, and I got selfish. I thought I could borrow it, fix my life, and you'd never notice. It was wrong, and I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just needed you to know I'm trying to be better." Ethan's chest ached. He remembered Julian's mother, a kind woman who'd sent them homemade cookies during their brief, blissful months together. He hadn't known she'd been sick. He hadn't known a lot of things. "You could have told me," Ethan said quietly. "I would have helped." "I was too proud," Julian admitted, "and too scared you'd see me as less." The park grew darker, the city's hum a distant pulse. Ethan didn't know what to do with the storm inside him. Anger, grief, and something dangerously close to love. He stood, shoving the check into his pocket. "I need time," he said, and walked away, Julian's silhouette fading into the dusk. Back in his Manhattan penthouse, Ethan couldn't sleep. He poured a whiskey and stared at the city skyline, replaying Julian's words. The check sat on his counter, a tangible weight. He called his best friend, Lila, a 40-year-old lawyer with a no-nonsense streak. "He's back, and he's sick," Ethan told her, his voice raw. "What do I do?" Lila sighed. "You don't owe him anything, Ethan. But if he's telling the truth, maybe this is about closure. For both of you." Closure. The word felt hollow. Ethan didn't want closure. He wanted the Julian he'd loved back, the one who'd made him laugh until his sides hurt. But that Julian was gone, replaced by a man fighting for redemption and time. The next morning, Ethan went to the hospital listed on Julian's wristband. The receptionist confirmed Julian was a patient but couldn't share more. Ethan left a note. "I'm not ready to forgive you, but I'm here. Tell me what you need." He didn't expect a reply, but hours later, his phone buzzed. "Just you," Julian texted. "Can we talk again?" They met at a small cafe in Williamsburg, a neutral ground. Julian looked frilier, his sweater hanging loose, but his smile was the same, tentative, hopeful. He talked about his treatment, the endless chemo, the fear of not waking up. Ethan listened, his walls crumbling with every word. "I don't want your pity," Julian said. "I just want you to know who I really am." Ethan reached across the table, his hand hovering before pulling back. "I don't know who that is anymore," he said. But as they parted, he promised to meet again. Something was shifting, and Ethan wasn't sure he could stop it. Ethan couldn't stay away. Over the next few weeks, he and Julian met regularly, cafes, parks, even the hospital waiting room during Julian's chemo sessions. Each meeting chipped away at Ethan's defenses. Julian was different now, stripped of the bravado that had once masked his flaws. He was honest, raw, and achingly human. One afternoon, as they walked through Central Park, Julian stopped to catch his breath, leaning against a tree. "I don't deserve this," he said, gesturing at the space between them. "You being here. Why are you doing this, Ethan?" Ethan didn't have a clear answer. "Because I can't not," he said finally. "I hate what you did, but I don't hate you." The admission felt like a surrender, and Julian's eyes softened. They started spending more time together, not as lovers but as something undefined. Ethan brought takeout to Julian's new apartment, a cramped studio in Queens. They watched old movies, laughed at terrible plot twists, and talked about everything except the past. But the past was always there, lurking in the silences. One night, Julian showed Ethan a photo album, his life before the scam. Pictures of his mother, his childhood in rural Ohio, his first camera. "I wanted to be someone you'd be proud of," Julian said. "Instead, I became someone I'm ashamed of." Ethan's throat tightened. "You could have been that person," he said. "You still can." Julian shook his head. "I'm running out of time, Ethan." The words were a knife. Ethan started researching leukemia, contacting specialists, offering to pay for experimental treatments. Julian resisted at first, insisting he didn't want Ethan's money. "This isn't about fixing me," Julian said. "It's about living what's left of my life honestly." But Ethan couldn't let go. He hired a private investigator to verify Julian's story, hating himself for the distrust but needing certainty. The report confirmed everything: Julian's mother's death, the debts, the diagnosis. It also revealed something else. Julian had been volunteering at a community center, teaching photography to kids, even as his health declined. Ethan confronted him at the center, where Julian was showing a group of teenagers how to frame a shot. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" Ethan asked, holding up the investigator's report. Julian's face fell. "You had me followed? I had to know," Ethan said, guilt twisting in his gut. "I needed to believe you." Julian looked away, hurt flickering in his eyes. "I'm not that guy anymore, Ethan. I'm trying to leave something good behind. If you can't trust that, maybe we shouldn't do this." Ethan left, the rift between them wider than ever. He spent days wrestling with his doubts, his pride, his heart. Lila's words echoed, "Closure, for both of you." But this wasn't closure. It was something messy, something real. He went back to the community center, finding Julian alone, packing up his camera. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "I want to trust you. I'm trying." Julian nodded, his expression soft but guarded. "Then let's try together," he said. Trying together was harder than Ethan expected. Trust was a fragile thing, rebuilt in small moments. Julian calling to check in, Ethan showing up with coffee during chemo, both of them navigating the ghosts of their past. They weren't the same men who'd fallen in love 2 years ago, but something new was growing, tentative and precious. Julian's health fluctuated. Some days he was vibrant, his laughter filling the room. Others he could barely get out of bed. Ethan learned to read the signs, when to push, when to give space. He started joining Julian at the community center, watching him teach with a passion that made Ethan's chest ache. The kids adored Julian, and Ethan saw the man he'd fallen for. Flawed, but fiercely kind. One evening, Julian asked Ethan to help him sort through old photos for a community exhibit. They sat on the floor of Julian's studio, surrounded by prints of cityscapes, faces, and fleeting moments. One photo stopped Ethan cold. A candid shot of himself, laughing, eyes bright with love, taken during their first month together. I kept it, Julian said softly. Even after everything. Ethan's voice caught. Why? Because it was real, Julian said. Even when I messed it up, what I felt for you was real. Ethan reached for Julian's hand, their fingers lacing together. For the first time in years, he let himself believe it. They kissed, slow and careful, like rediscovering a language they'd both forgotten. It wasn't a promise of forever. Julian's illness loomed too large, but it was a promise of now. The exhibit was a success. The community center packed with people admiring Julian's work. Ethan watched from the sidelines, proud and heartbroken. Julian's photos told stories of resilience, of beauty in broken things. A local gallery offered to showcase his work, and for a moment, Julian's eyes lit up with the dreams he'd once thought lost. But the next week, Julian collapsed during a chemo session. Ethan rushed to the hospital, his heart pounding. The doctors were grim. Julian's body wasn't responding to treatment anymore. Weeks, maybe, they said. Ethan stayed by Julian's side, holding his hand, telling stories of their best days to keep the fear at bay. Julian, weak but lucid, made Ethan promise something. Don't let this define you, he said. You're more than the guy who got scammed. You're the guy who loved me anyway. Ethan choked back tears. And you're the guy who showed me I could. As Julian's condition worsened, Ethan organized a final project. A book of Julian's photos, with proceeds going to the community center. He worked tirelessly, coordinating with publishers, rallying Julian's students to contribute captions. Julian saw the first draft before he was too weak to hold it, his smile radiant despite the pain. You're incredible, he whispered to Ethan. Ethan didn't feel incredible. He felt helpless, watching the man he loved slip away. But he kept going, for Julian, for the kids, for the part of himself that still believed in second chances. Julian passed quietly on a rainy morning, his hand in Ethan's, the hospital room filled with the soft hum of machines. Ethan didn't cry at first, he was too numb. He sat there, holding on to Julian's warmth until it faded, memorizing the lines of his face. The man who'd broken his heart had also mended it, in ways Ethan was only beginning to understand. The weeks that followed were a blur. Ethan threw himself into finishing Julian's photo book, titled Moments of Us. It became a quiet sensation, not for its polish but for its heart. Each image a testament to Julian's ability to find beauty in the ordinary. The community center named a scholarship after him, funded by the book sales, ensuring his legacy lived on. But the real twist came months later, at a small memorial event for Julian. Ethan was speaking to the crowd, sharing stories of Julian's impact, when a young woman approached him. She was Mia, a 28-year-old social worker, and she held a letter Julian had written before his death. He wanted you to have this, she said, her eyes kind but hesitant. Ethan opened it alone, his hands shaking. Julian's words were simple but piercing. Ethan, I loved you more than I ever said. I'm sorry for the pain I caused, but I'm not sorry for us. You gave me a reason to be better. Keep loving, keep trusting. You're my greatest shot. Tucked inside was a photo, the same candid of Ethan from years ago, with a note on the back. You're enough. Ethan broke down, the weight of Julian's love and regret crashing over him. He realized then that Julian hadn't just repaid a debt. He'd given Ethan back his faith in people. The scam, the betrayal, the sickness, they were part of their story, but not the whole of it. Years later, Ethan stood at the community center, now expanded with funds from Julian's book. He was older, softer, with a new partner by his side. A quiet, steady man named Marcus, who taught Ethan that love could be simple. As they unveiled a plaque for Julian, Ethan felt a peace he hadn't known was possible. The crowd applauded, but Ethan's eyes were on the sky, where he swore he saw a glimpse of Julian's smile. The twist wasn't just that Julian had repaid the money or faced his illness with courage. It was that, in his flaws and his fight, he'd shown Ethan the power of forgiveness. Not just for Julian, but for himself. Ethan had been scammed, yes, but he'd also been loved, fiercely and imperfectly. And that, he knew, was worth everything.